All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rick Manning, and I'm the Executive Director of the Friends of Stewart Park. And thank you all for showing up on this rainy night here in Ithaca. We are excited to share our presentation tonight about the Tompkins Pollinator Pathway. I do have a few quick announcements first about some other related activities, and then I will introduce Brandon and we'll get going. First, we do have a guided bird walk coming up in the park with Mina Haribel, and she's wonderful. And she'll be in the park on Sunday, April 28th at 8:30. And if you want to attend that, there's no need to register, but you can just come to the Cascadilla Boathouse, which is adjacent to the Fuertes Overlook, and join in the fun. The last time she did it about a month ago, she had about 25 people, had a really great response. And I heard that she was a wonderful tour leader. You can advance that, Brandon. I love my park day. So that's another day. We had our waterfront cleanup about 2 weeks ago, and a lot of people came, about 40, and we've been doing some big groups since then. And we've been doing litter pickup. That's kind of the focus of the waterfront cleanup, really. And also a lot of, we have this invasive shrub all along the edge of the Stewart Park, and also a lot in Cass Park, called Amorpha fruticosa, or false indigo bush. It's very aggressive, and we're cutting that back to the ground. We're not killing it. We can't kill it, really. But we're cutting it back so we can more effectively manage it. It's a southern native, but it's very invasive, and as far as we know, serves no real use other than blocking the view of Cayuga Lake and the waterfront. So we are managing that with volunteers and trying to, as best we can, to leave cattails and other natives. So this day we'll be doing more gardening activities. We've tried to delay a lot of our more aggressive spring cleaning activities. We're leaving a lot of last year's growth up until at least May 4th, and we'll evaluate that as we approach that time. So you can go ahead, Brandon. And our landscape gardener, Frank Muller, is doing a bio blitz. I see a little typo here. It's blitz with a T. But this will be on Saturday, June 8th, and it's a great kind of citizen science effort to use the platform of iNaturalist to document basically plants and wildlife within the waterfront corridor. We'll be sending more detailed information with some links on how to download that app. I'm sure many of you already have it. But it's a great way to share what you're seeing, or to even post photographs to try to have others comment on what it is if you don't know what you're identifying. There are many apps for plant and wildlife and bird identification, but this is one of them. But it's very good at sharing information, and Frank's very good at it. He'll do some training, and so we'll have the time and location posted in a upcoming newsletter, probably the early May newsletter. So okay, that's good. I think that's all of our announcements. Yeah, so I'm pleased to introduce Brandon Hoak to do tonight's talk. So this is our pollinator playground planter planting bed that our board of directors planted about 5 years ago, right next to the carousel, and it's at the border of the preschool playground area, the community build area, and the park and the lake edge. And we love the way this looks. It doesn't look, well, it's all in the eye of the beholder. Now it's got a lot of spring flowering bulbs that are being kind of growing up into a lot of last year's vegetation, a lot of seed heads and grass heads and stuff. So anyway, it's a bed that we're very proud of, and we work hard to maintain this. It's an important location. So we've gotten interested in this concept of pollinator pathways. It's something that is kind of going, very popular in the country. At our native plants conference that the plantsman Dan Siegel and I put on, we had Mary Ellen LeMay speak about 3 years ago during COVID remotely. And she talked about an initiative, a national initiative that's centered in Eastern Connecticut. And we thought she was a great speaker. So she spoke for us 2 years ago on another winter spring session that we had just like this on her National Pollinator Pathway Network. We, Friends of Stewart Park, joined that last year. And through joining it, we learned that Tompkins County also has a pollinator pathway. And we didn't know that. It's sort of centered in Cornell University. And that's what you'll be hearing about tonight is the Tompkins Pollinator Pathway. We're pleased to have Brandon do the presentation. He presented at this year's conference just about 2 months ago. And he presented with Christy Sullivan of the Department of Natural Resources, who is also the director of the Master Naturalists for New York State. And Brandon graduated recently with a degree in design and environmental analysis, and he's a native plant specialist and outreach lead for the Tompkins County Pollinator Pathway, and which is part of Cornell's Public and Ecosystem Health Program and the Department of Natural Resources. And Brandon is really excited, and we're very excited for him that he just got accepted to Yale to get his Master's of Environmental Management in Ecosystem Conservation and Environmental Justice. So Brandon, I think this is your show here, and take it over. And as far as we will have question and answer afterward, and we will try our best to monitor the chat. But I would reserve your questions for after and send them into a chat, and we'll kind of read them. We'll probably hold most of the questions until the end. So, okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rick. Rick and I are also both Zooming from the same place, so I'm trying to make sure we don't get any weird noise back and forth. So if you see why I'm muted in the meantime, just because of that. Yeah, feel free as I give this presentation to drop questions into the chat. I'll make sure to get to them at the end. But without further ado, I'm really excited to be giving this talk. I really enjoy the Stewart Park as well as the Cayuga Waterfront Trail. I've gotten to know it very well. And myself and Kate Dickin, who's also on this call, who's one of the co-founders, along with Christy Sullivan of the Tompkins Pollinator Pathway, we got to walk the trail with Rick and see a lot of the gardens. So I'm going to integrate that into the presentation today and talk about how the individual pollinator gardens are part of this larger network that we're getting to see flourish both in our county as well as across the nation. Can everybody hear me okay? Can I just get one thumbs up or something? Okay, great. Wonderful. So here's me. You can already see me, but I have a lot shorter hair in this photo. This is me lounging, I think, in the slope near Cornell, finding butterfly weed here. Rick already mentioned some of my background, but I'm a native plant specialist, and I do the communication and outreach with the Tompkins Pollinator Pathway. In my time outside of doing this work, I do native landscape design and gardening. As well as help run a small ecological restoration plot over at the Soil Factory called Marshy Garden that I co-run with Ash Ferlito, who's a local artist. Yeah, this is what I'm passionate about, and it makes me very excited to give this talk. I really am interested in how grassroots organizations and how we can communicate with people in helping both humans as well as non-humans alike. And I think doing pollinator pathway work is a great place to start with that. So yeah, for today's talk, the outline will be as follows. I'm going to give some general definitions of both what the pathway is and native plants, as well as pollinators. Talk a little bit about Friends of Stewart Park's role in that and the Cayuga Waterfront Trail's role in that, as well as how you can join the pathway, how to design a garden, and then answering some general questions at the end. Some takeaways that I'd like for everybody to get away from this is a good understanding of pollinators, what native plants are and how to find them, using design as a tool, and some ways that everyone can feel that they can get involved and have agency in creating positive environmental change. So to start with some basic definitions, the pollinator pathway is a term both coined and kind of started in essence by the National Pollinator Pathway in 2017 in Connecticut, which is very close to where I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. It is the concept that within a county or a town, a city, or even a state, that there are public and private corridors of pesticide-free areas that have native plantings along them to provide habitat and nutrition for all types of pollinators. So here is a great little illustration done by the U.S. Forest Service. I think this is from a group out in California. But this shows, like, on a very minor scale, a little like extended garden bed and all the type of biodiversity. You can see fallen logs. You can see bare patches of dirt. You can see some of the pollinators. These are all things and details that I'll go into later in the presentation, but I like, in essence, that it's basically a jigsaw puzzle of these small little pieces being fit together across these larger areas. Pollinators are any type of animal species, most commonly bees, birds, bats, butterflies, moths, flies, wasps, beetles, and ants, that help move pollen from the male to the female part of flowers. The process results in fruits, seeds, and young plants. So as you can guess, a large part of the conversation around pollinators and the emphasis on a pathway is that it also brings a level of food security and health and well-being to both people and the planet. Pollinators are truly at this crux of what we all need to survive. Without new plants, without new fruit, without new seeds, many species around the world, human and non-human alike, would not have the sustenance they need. Here on the bottom, I just displayed a couple of my favorite pollinators. You can see a ruby-throated hummingbird feeding from some trumpet honeysuckle, gold digger wasp on some butterfly weed, and a monarch butterfly on some swamp milkweed. I'm a big fan of milkweed, if you haven't guessed yet. But the last definition is native plants. So native plants are the indigenous plants to this area. They co-evolved with the animal species as well as the indigenous folks who lived here and who still live here to this day. And they are very important in maintaining ecosystem health. Without some of these native plants, certain species that are reliant on them would just completely disappear. Part of the large endangerment of many species that we're seeing is due to the fact that these individual plant species that are very well adapted to only one specific niche of growing environment, so they grow in one crack in one side of a hill, are disappearing. And there are some pollinator species that rely on those. So that'll also be a little bit of my talk today. I also wanted to mention that native plants are a very broad category. We in this area are very lucky to have a lot of people focused on native plants, and you can get as very specific as the ecoregion of a native plant. So for here, that's defined by the U.S. Geological Service, and that involves the Northern Allegheny Plateau, as well as the Finger Lakes, Upland, and Gorges region. So that can be usually broken up by watersheds. But for today's talk, I will talk more broadly about species across North America in general. So who are we at our essence? We are a collaboration between Cornell and the county at large and the community, so both individuals as well as organizations. Our goal is to work together to link habitats across the county in creating this chain of a pollinator pathway. Why a pathway now really has to do on, like, the endangerment of species that we're seeing. We've had drastic declines in many invertebrate species. Bee populations, both native and honeybee, have dropped drastically over the past decades. A lot of this due to loss of habitat and pesticides. About 85% of our world's flowering plants, according to Xerces, require reproduction via pollinators, not just bees specifically. So it's very important that we support these animals, both for their own sake as well as ourselves. And then another couple really positive benefits of engaging in this work is microclimate resiliency. So that's helping to combat urban heat island effect. So as people pave roads and parking lots and put up more buildings that consist of dark pavement and stone and metal and brick, we're basically raising the local temperature. You see this a lot more in major cities, but it still exists within Ithaca. I know from going out from the countryside in one day all the way back downtown, there can be a huge difference. Also, that has to do with our geography, but in general, it definitely has to do with the concentration of development in one area. Another benefit of doing this work is community bonding and positive mental health. Getting out in the garden, getting connected with people, spending time outdoors in nature has all been shown in many articles to prove mental health and feelings of connection. I also was emphasizing the loss of habitat again, just because I think this is a really cool area where people can get involved, whether there's a parking lot or a lawn or a building that's no longer being used. There's all these spaces that are not really serving a functional role for biodiversity. And it's up to us as people to help create that change and restore habitat. Um, Most of all, what Tompkins County Pollinator Pathway has become and what we really aim to do was become a hub for resources. I'll go into detail on this in the next section, but we're really focused on providing all of the following: a steady stream of communication, a place where people can go check out resources online, seeing where gardens are around the county, and hopefully providing some like inspiration through some of the cool accolades we're creating around being engaged in the pathway. Here's a lovely little photo that I took my first year of doing my own pollinator garden. This is a monarch caterpillar actually clinging and about to form chrysalis underneath zigzag goldenrod. So although that they feed on milkweed as their host plant, they will actually start their chrysalis in many other places I've learned. They've also started it on chicken wire, which I think is quite endearing. But aside from the photo, tools and community engagement, as mentioned prior, our website, our online map, and the signs and badges we've created. So here's a brief little walkthrough that I'm going to do of our website. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner, I gave credit to the screenshot that I took, but the URL for the website can be listed there. So it's blogs.cornell.edu, Tompkins Pollinator Pathway. I encourage you all to check it out on your own time. But for now, I'll do like a walkthrough of some of the great key features that we've included in the website. Here I've highlighted the resources tab. One reason why I wanted to showcase this is that we are very specific to the county. We have two nested categories under here, native gardens in Tompkins County and native nurseries in Tompkins County. These are really important to pick out because we're so fortunate here both to have so many gardens, both along the waterfront trail as well as dispersed throughout the county, and many places to get native plants. This is not always so accessible in so many places, so it's been a really key feature for us to publicize and get people involved in these amazing resources that we have. We also have a newsletter section. So I also encourage you to reach out and sign up for our newsletter. But in case you're a new follower or you just would like to look at them online in your own time, we have all of our newsletters archived on the website. So here I'm pointing an arrow to the March newsletter, which discussed many different topics. This was actually our last year's March newsletter. We have this year's out as well. And we talk about things like Leave the Leaves, No Mow May, native pollinators and native plants that are timely usually with this season. So last year we talked about skunk cabbage and its very cool property of thermogenesis. This basically means that it's able to use heat that it pulls up from its roots and the energy that it stores, and create almost like a warm pocket around it that melts the snow and allows it to get pollinated very early on. Also, many of you know that they stink. So they use more than one technique, but they are able to attract flies and beetles and early pollinating insects. So we like to discuss stuff like that in our newsletter. Another great example was our May newsletter from last year as well. This one I really wanted to point out because we actually listed some really cool resources for, we listed some very cool resources to plant in different areas. So we had a section dedicated to hot, dry, and sunny. We had a section dedicated to rainy, soggy, and wet. We had a section dedicated to shady gardens. All of these different areas can be tackled. A lot of people feel, I think, very deterred when they're dealing with these issues based on like watering or poor soil. But the great thing with native plants is that there's always some type of native plant that will fit that niche superbly. So we really like to provide resources to get people going on that as well. Here's two other photos of me tabling at community events. This is at the annual plant sale on the left, which we will be attending and tabling at again next month. So I encourage you to see us there. This is also on the right, another event that we helped put on with Grow Wild Native Nursery and their founder, Deanna English, out in Brooktondale. Both of these events are really used to help inform the public both on the subject matter that I'm sharing today, as well as some things that might be more in depth. So at the Goldenrod and Asters celebration we had at Grow Wild Native Nursery, we got to explore the meadow that's being restored there, as well as the vernal pools, and see different techniques in engaging in what it means to be in the pathway. Another key component to our outreach that spans beyond the individual interaction is with our local partners. So here you can see a long list of really wonderful organizations around Ithaca that are participating with us, either helping host community speaks like this, or have their own pollinator gardens that the public can access. I'll go a little bit more into detail on that, but we highly encourage, if you're related with an organization, to definitely reach out. We're always interested in expanding this ever-growing network of people. It's funny, as I was putting together this presentation, I keep thinking about how it's a meta experience in that we're connecting all these gardens along this pathway, but then at the same time, we're also collecting and connecting all these organizations along the pathway too. So it's very cool to be part of that. Here, I'm gonna bridge into our mapping component. So one of the key features of what we've been accomplishing and can be seen on our website is that we have an interactive map through GIS software, or Geographic Information Systems, that shows all the pollinator gardens around Ithaca. This is a great citizen science tool because it takes the individuals and the organizations to input their data and say, we are here, to show us the kind of path that's already been forming along these like veins that are spreading across the county. It's a very cool interactive tool. It helps us track our physical progress, and it really allows us to visualize the gaps in our data. So if there's an area that has a lot of gardens, let's say Fall Creek, for example, how can we kind of shift that focus and connect more gardens going off of that, expanding maybe into downtown? So it's been a great tool. It's very easy to access. When you log onto the website, it's on the first or the second tab, join the pollinator pathway in red here, seen in the photo. And you have two very easy ways to get involved. There's the Pollinator Pathway Pledge, and then there's the Tompkins Pollinator Pathway Map Survey, both of which are linked on this page. The pledge is very simple and just has you basically saying that you agree to planting native, providing nesting for animals, and avoiding pesticide, and that you'll help share this with your neighbors. And it immediately drops you a little pin on the map that you've given a pledge. In addition, if you do the survey, all you have to provide is your name, your address, which is kept private and not able to seen directly on the map as you zoom in, as well as an email address. And we really encourage folks to add their plant species as well, since it's great data for us to have in seeing what plants are most prolific, which pollinators are doing the best, etc. But these only take 2 and 10 minutes to do. So if you're in the county, I very much encourage you to do so. Here's kind of a screenshot again of what that looks like. So here you can see the yellow circles marking people who have pledged. You can see the orange circles marking pollinator habitats that are private gardens. So as you zoom in, those will disappear. And then the green diamonds are our public gardens, which I will spend more time focusing on with the Waterfront Trail and Stewart Park. So here I've circled all the different gardens that are housed within the Cayuga Waterfront Trail and Friends of Stewart Park network. and quite literally along their own pollinator pathway that they're forming along their trail, which is fantastic. As you click on each of those individual diamonds, you can see which garden is actually in that spot and some of the details about is it open to the public? What are the hours? What's the name of the garden? So it makes it very easy to explore all the native gardens in the county. It's very fantastic. I'm very excited to explore some of the ones that I didn't even know about until I'd seen on the map. So I'm going to kind of go through some of my favorite gardens that are part of the trail, starting with the simple trail plantings that are done near the beginning trailhead in Stewart Park. In this garden, you can see common milkweed, wild bergamot, blue false indigo, golden Alexander. It's very beautiful. I'm sure many of you guys have seen it walking along the park at the entrance, but it has the great greeting sign too. This one's really wonderful and one of my favorites just because it spans the length of Stewart Park's waterfront, particularly so. So it makes a really nice corridor, and that's something we're really trying to focus on with this initiative. It's a great example of how you can connect spaces for insects to fly more readily and easily. The next garden is the playground or carousel garden. It was installed by the Friends of Stewart Park, and it showcases swamp milkweed beautifully. If you ever want to go see it, it's a great place too. Here you can see it in full bloom, right against the wonderful playground that's there. Very nice area. You can also see, I think it's Joe Pye weed to the right, and you can also see some common milkweed here as well. This is another great area, and again, its proximity to the other gardens in Stewart Park make it a really viable option for pollinators that are flying around looking for sustenance. The Crew Cove Overlook has another great garden and a good place to sit. It has a very fantastic bench. It has a very interesting array of plants. It has the Virginia rose, it has the redbud tree, it has a bayberry and a tulip tree. It also has fall sunflower or oxeye, another great another great flower in the helianthus family. Sunflowers actually are one of the best plants for the native bees in our area, so I definitely encourage checking out the native sunflower species. And here is a photo, I believe, in fall. And you can see the blue star or Amsonia right in front of the bench. And you can also see, I think, the tulip tree behind it. It also looks like there's some sumac that might have planted itself outside of the fence, but it's probably doing a very nice job also attracting pollinators. And here's a photo of it in the warm time with a lot of purple coneflower in the beds. Backtracking a little bit because unfortunately I put my slides out of order. I am going back to the Fuertes Overlook, which is at the tip of Stewart Park, where there's a little pond space. This is a great area that was founded by the Cayuga Bird Club and has some really interesting species that I didn't see in a lot of the rest of the trail. I definitely wanted to highlight the fact that Virginia creeper is in this bed. This is a really wonderful native vine that people tend to think poorly of, but it is very good, especially in that it's the host species for I believe, the Virginia tiger moth, which I've seen many times nearby or close to the vine itself. Also mentioned here is the red osier dogwood, a great species that offers winter interest with the red stems and is a great supporter of birds and pollinators alike with the sweet berries that it has and great white blooms. Here is the Fuertes Overlook with the sun peeking through. So you have some of the trees here, and then you have the switchgrass and Joe Pye weed along the edge. And if you go take a closer look, which I encourage you to do so, you can actually see a lot other of the plants listed on the prior slide. And then the bird garden, which I think is the last one I'm going to focus on. This garden has a wonderful installation of the different birds that can be seen in the Cass Park area as well as Tompkins County, and talks about the relationship to different plants. Here you have some really interesting species again with sassafras and hawthorn. They also have cutleaf coneflower in this bed. And again, it's a really wonderful garden. And I love the design and look of it with the really cool pavilion that has the little red-winged blackbird sculpture on top of it. Another really cool garden to check out. One of the things that we're doing with the Cayuga Waterfront Trail and Friends of Stewart Park is that we're very fortunate to have just gotten Tompkins Pollinator Pathway signs. So these signs will be available to the public and for anybody who's registered and gotten their garden on that map. So this is a good push to get your garden on there. And these signs we're going to distribute both with the Cayuga Waterfront Trail so that they can install them at their individual pollinator gardens so that they're easy to find. But also please reach out and find us at some of the tabling events that we have coming up so you can get them while we still have some. Another really cool thing that we're putting together that helps display people's involvement are these badges that were designed by Devin Davis. Devin Davis graduated Cornell and does environmental and illustrative work. She designed a very wide array of these badges to help emphasize features of successful pollinator gardens, as well as promote different aspects of pollinator habitat that really need focus on for conservation. One of the really wonderful features about these is their accuracy to local plant biodiversity. And you can see even in the first one that shows just the number of native plants a garden might have, has already some wonderful species illustrated on it. Here, more in depth, you can see the bloom variation badge. I wanted to highlight this badge and the ones on the next slides because they connect to really good concepts that we're focusing on with Tompkins Pollinator Pathway. So here you can see an array of 7 different blooms that are local to our region. I really love the bottle gentian, which is towards the top right corner, the cardinal flower towards the top left, and the butterfly weed towards the bottom middle. And these different flowers you can notice have all different colors or different hues. They all have different petal arrangements and floral structures. The importance of this and what we're really trying to suggest to folks is that by planting a larger range or a very biodiverse group of native plants in your area, you will be able to really attract a wide array of pollinator species versus if you had just planted maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of these species. A lot of different bees rely on UV and other hues that can be seen by the human eye that these flowers emanate, as well as the fact that these different floral structures provide different openings for different pollinators that might have features like a longer proboscis or the tongue that comes out of like a butterfly, or a different beak structure for like a ruby-throated hummingbird. Here you can kind of see 2 really wonderful examples. It's a ruby-throated hummingbird on the right, feeding from Monarda didyma or Oswego tea. And then on the left is one of my favorite images, and it's all over the place on any pollinator pathway website you go onto. But it is a bumblebee shoving their head face first into penstemon or beard tongue, which is a fantastic sight to see, and definitely recommend planting this in your garden as soon as possible so you can see it yourself. Other badges that I wanted to focus on was the nesting and overwintering badges we have. Super cute little bumblebee underneath the ground, looking very awake, but I assure you they're not that time of season. Lots of different pollinators, especially the bee species, will go underground and basically hibernate, particularly the queens. So here you can see a layer of leaf litter over them, giving insulation. And then on the right badge for nesting habitat, you can see a snag or a dead tree that hasn't fallen, as well as some logs and some twigs and some really nice array of local leaves. I see the tulip and white oak and a sugar maple. These are to kind of highlight the difference that the badges are used to distinguish between key concepts. Overwintering and nesting are very similar, and both require this kind of newfound practice for, at least within our culture, of leaving gardens a little bit messy, embracing detritus, leaving fallen wood and leaves. But there's a seasonality component to each of these. I mean, the overwintering is really focused on what pollinators need to get them through the winter, whereas the nesting habitat is to really focus on this warm season when they're out starting their nests and broods. So that's another reason why we've generated these badges to help distinguish. And you can get these badges if you also take the surveys on our website. We're still figuring out how we're going to distribute them, but please do send in your notes that you've been working on these kind of missions because it's great for us to know and see. Lastly, I'm just going to wrap up with combining some of my own experience with landscape design and gardening, and applying it to pollinator pathway principles. Um, so I'll talk about diversifying your habitat, native plant protection, some of the cool color and seasonal pairings I recommend, and planting for species. Um, so here is a great image of the ecological restoration project I mentioned at the very beginning of the talk. This is a great image of marshy garden in spring. You can see the water pool is very full. We're very fortunate to have a very mucky space that attracts frogs and other insects that rely on the water. In addition, and most importantly, allows us to plant swamp milkweed and common boneset and elderberry and blue flag iris. And right now, which is incredible, marsh marigold. If you ever attend the soil factory and have seen this project out in the field, I highly recommend going out and checking on the marsh marigold right now. It is very vibrant. I should have included a photo of it in this presentation, but this principle of kind of adjusting the topography as seen here. So we had dug that hole where we knew water was pooling, to create new habitat for these plants, these animals, can be done in many different forms, seen as like a bioswale or a rain garden or a retention area. And it's a great solution versus installing drains or other types of infrastructure features that are actually going to remove that water when you could really use it to generate a whole new niche of ecosystem. It's something that I really push for in instilling with people. Another thing that I unfortunately don't have a photo of here is the rock garden that is also located on the site, and a great thing to check out as well. This was an area that was used for debris dumping and detrite and human-made detritus prior the using of the site by us. And it's left this area to be very uninhabitable for many species that use long, like deep roots and are used to more loamy or rich or wet soils. So what we've done with that area is if we planted a very different array of species such as prairie smoke or eastern prickly pear cactus or some of the really dry phloxes. And I encourage folks to do that. If you have an area that seems like really subpar in the planting conditions, look at like what other plants you might be able to uh, kind of infuse into that zone. And we definitely have resources on that. So please do reach out. Some other things that we recommend for diversifying habitat is the dead wood and creating brush piles and bermings and connecting surrounding habitats through those means. So here you can see is a brush pile that was created by Ash for Lido at the garden. It's a very sculptural piece. It's also very tall. I think it's probably about 10 feet tall at its peak. And this collection of fallen sticks, both from this area as well as other areas, is used to support insects that are going to burrow into the dead wood. It's used by different birds for perching. I've seen bluebirds hanging out there in large flocks. I've seen the red-tailed hawks sitting there perching and diving down for prey in the garden. It's used by different plant species. Here you can see the trumpet honeysuckle that is slowly making its way up every single year, providing food for the hummingbirds that will come and visit. It's a grapevine that we've been able to attach to the brush pile, and it's making its way to cover it. We also have Rubus odora with this kind of broad looking, almost maple-like leaves in the middle of the photo. This is purple flowering raspberry. A great species that is enjoying the little bit of shade that the brush pile provides it. And then there's other species like such as pokeweed that are nested underneath the brush pile to give them shade. So using these like pieces of detritus and wood creatively offers so much ecological benefit as well as economical. It's very easy to do some cool sculptural features or make little piles for nesting versus hauling them off to the dump or anything. So it's a great use of these materials. And I also really encourage folks to check out this art practice of wattle fencing. It's a very cool way of using pieces of reed or wood that might be left over from different plant species and making fencing out of it. It's very cool and is a very natural way to use materials. Here are some color and seasonal pairings I wanted to mention. Um, or particularly one. This is swamp milkweed on the left, obedient plant in the middle, or false dragon head, and then boneset on the right, each seen with a different pollinator, the goldenrod soldier beetle, the eastern or the ruby-throated hummingbird, and the gold digger wasp. And I like to mention this pairing that was so thoughtfully introduced to me by Deanna English at Grow Wild Native Nursery. Is they all bloom around the same time. They're all wetland species, so they all grow at Marshy Garden. And they have a really complementary range of hues. I mean, with the pink and the purple and the white, it's really wonderful that these native plant combinations that just exist and can be found in areas where these wetland habitats are retained actually have their own kind of artistic and synergistic element to them when viewed. And it's just kind of happenstance that they became that way. So I really like to mention that one, and that there's many other native plant pairings that can be grouped together. And again, reach out if you would like suggestions. And lastly, I really encourage folks to plant for species. There's so many plants out there that are less common and are still native that really need to get reestablished back in this area because pollinators are suffering. You can see on the left the rusty patch bumblebee, which is endangered in many different states, as well as this yellow loosestrife bee that feeds from the native yellow loosestrife, so not the purple loosestrife that is non-native and is seen very prolifically around the county, but this yellow loosestrife that's used to make a very interesting, I believe, oil for the broods of this bee. But it's a great species to support through planting this very atypical native pollinator plant. And again, I mentioned eastern tiger swallowtails, monarch butterflies, pipevine swallowtails, sweat bees, mason bees. There's so many different species that you can support. And again, just look through the resources on our website or reach out. We're always happy to connect people with different plants that would support a pollinator you might be really passionate about. One of my favorite things is when folks tell me that like a butterfly or the ruby-throated hummingbird reminds them of a loved one in their life who might be with them or not anymore, and being able to find plant species that will attract those animals so that they get to see them more commonly and remind them of people that we are connected with through plants. So that concludes the end of the presentation. I'm super excited to take questions and get in touch with anybody. I've listed the website for the pathway. I've put down the QR code that I believe should take you also to the website. The email for us, the link to the Ecological Restoration Project, as well as the Instagram, and then my Cornell email if you want to get in touch directly about any of the questions for pollinators or gardens, but also feel free to just email directly to the Tompkins Pollinator Pathway line. One way or another, it should get over to me. So thank you so much. I look forward to answering some questions.
Thank you, Brandon. Where am I? Let me find myself. There I am.
Oh yes, hummingbird moths are a great species and definitely can be attracted with a lot of the native plants. Will the recording be up, Rick?
Oh, we should have it up in a week or so. Is that what the question is? When would it be up? Yeah, it shouldn't take long for, I suspect Janelle will do it next week for sure.
I do see a question from Matt Dallos, who I will mention has a wonderful garden to check out. If you guys have not seen it, it is the Wild Garden on Live Slope. It is fantastic. It also has a really wonderful Instagram page to check out, as well as website, I believe. The question was, do you have thoughts on how we can all advocate for more public pollinator gardens? Is it working with local government? Yes, it is. I am currently in the process of working on a project with the Dryden High School on helping them with them getting their pollinator garden set up. But a lot of them, I think the funding that could be unlocked for these projects really does come from, I think, the municipal level. So reaching out to whether it's Danby or Enfield or Newfield or Caroline or Brookendale, whatever your local kind of municipality is, I think encouraging the folks there who oftentimes are very on board with these ideas that you want to get a garden going and could recruit some folks to help with the maintenance and the kind of structure and design of it, I think is really the thing. And then hopefully getting funding from those entities to actually install and purchase plants from our local sources that are here is a great opportunity. So I think there's a lot of folks that are really interested in that in the municipality. So I think reaching out to the local government is one of the best options. And we're definitely helpful and encouraging of those conversations and would love to know and be apprised of what's going on with those. Will you be offering garden tours again this summer? Last year's was great. I'm assuming this is in reference to the Marshy Garden tour. And yes, we will be. We're going to try and run one about once a month with different focuses on whatever plants are in bloom then or some key features that might be different. I would like to set one up as soon as possible so that I can really show people how swampy it is right now. The water basically comes up to like my mid calf in the whole center section of it. And those marsh marigolds, as I mentioned, are nearly submerged coming out, as well as so many other plant species. It's a very fascinating look at kind of what a floodplain or a wetland area can look like in a more I guess domestic setting because it was once a lawn, so it has a very different look than if you go to like let's say just like a an area that's full of cattails or like the edge of the lake. So yes, we will be running those, and I will hopefully be able to send information out. It should come through the Soil Factory email, or please just get in touch or follow our Instagram. Please share your previous last page with the resources and QR code. Yes, I can do that. Here you go. And then Kate said, I think the town of Ithaca. Oh, that was in a question or an answer to one of the past questions. Wonderful. Does anybody else have any other questions, either for the chat or just in person over the mic? I'm more than happy to answer either.
I just want to mention one thing about spring cleanup. So I tend to be a tidy gardener, and I'm restraining myself with some difficulty in being so tidy. And last year we started on the waterfront trail on some of these perennial beds, native perennial beds. The standard horticultural practice would be to cut them back, and you might, if you're feeling wild and crazy, you might leave them all winter, but then cut them back as soon as you get the first hint of spring, down to the ground, rake everything off, put it in the compost pile, go to the mulch pile or buy mulch, bring it back, spread it all over the garden. And that's sort of standard horticultural practice, I guess, to me anyway. And last year, because of some information, actually, we learned from the Pollinator Path Network, the Tompkins group, we changed that up a little bit. So on the waterfront cleanup, which was a mid to late April, we cut things back. And we tried it in the playground pollinator bed where we have a lot of flowering bulbs, which we wanted to expose more. So basically we cut back a lot of the tall grasses and perennials in short cuts, just with hand pruners, so that the seeds and the materials would just settle in within the stems. And we left about 18 inches of stems up so you could more clearly see the bulbs. And then eventually, and we didn't have to bring in any mulch, and it was really easy and really fast. And there is the wildlife activity that, in the stems, and certainly in the material that has fallen to the ground as well. This year, we've taken a little more aggressive approach. And basically, we've just left everything, and in early to mid-May, we will come in and and then start trimming plants back. Once you start seeing green growth underneath, and that's really definitely a time where you can do it with minimizing any impacts on pollinators. So it's just something we're doing, and I have found that the whole idea of importing mulch when you have a lot of material that you can just let fall onto the ground if you cut it small enough is it was just made life much easier, and it's just a much more sustainable, much better model. So I would encourage you to think about that, and to and a lot of these practices that I think Brandon shows, they're not in conventional terms, maybe the tidiest, the rock pile, the brush pile, but I think they just work. And I think changing your aesthetic values, and it's not like your whole garden needs to be that way necessarily, but I think taking steps in that direction is really worth doing and exploring with, and seeing if you can change your kind of aesthetic values and the way you perceive your garden. You have any comments on that, Brandon? I know you've thought about this probably more than I have.
Not particularly. I was also keeping up with the chat. We've had many
Oh,
other
okay, good.
wonderful points, but yeah, no, the process of keeping a garden tidy and balancing that with the kind of ecology of it all. I think it's, for me, in my own practice, I just try and challenge to reevaluate expectations. I think there's a lot of beauty in keeping as much of the kind of I don't know, the detritus and these kind of different brown hues in a garden as well. So I really just look at it that way, from this like kind of artistic perspective of how can you kind of include different textures and colors through kind of past remnants of the plant species. I think it's a different way, but a fun way to look at it.
Right.
We do have pollinator pathway handouts, so we can be in touch with you, Maggie, and get those over to you. And that goes for anybody who is trying to host any type of neighborhood or community event.
Hi, Brandon. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. That was great, and just mention that there is a listserv associated with this, and so if people go to the website or email that Tompkins Pollinator Pathway email, you can get on the listserv, and that's probably the easiest way to both get our newsletters and hear about upcoming events, but also ask questions like about the handouts and things like that, so that goes to our central piece. There are some things that could be printed from the website, or at least we have links to things that could be printed. And then I don't know if you talked about all of the upcoming events. So I will be in Trumansburg this Saturday. They're having an Earth Day event at the Trumansburg Farmers Market, and have a bunch of materials there, as well as our new signs for anyone who's put themselves on the map. And then the following week is the big one right on the waterfront trail at the farmers market. And so, Brandon, we'll make sure you have lots of handouts when you do that one.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Kate. And also, yes, thank you, Kate, for being here. She's done a wonderful job co-founding this project. So I'm very, very appreciative that she's spent so much time and energy getting it off the ground. And thank you for being here and mentioning all of those things. I was like, there's so many new updates that we're working with. So it's good to have another face here helping with that.
Yeah, and I think so far it has been a group of us primarily at Cornell, but we'd really like it to be a community thing. So if people want to get involved in any way, we'd love to hear from you and hear about your ideas. If different schools or organizations want to partner with us, we would love that. Okay.
Hey, could you tell us more about the farmers market event then?
Oh, so on Earth Day, I think it's the Zero Waste Project that's affiliated with the market, organizes tabling by various organizations. And we were there last year, and it was right by the market, but along the trail part that's right by the market.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, we tabled there. There was a whole range of people from local organizations, and Brandon signed up for this year.
Cool.
And there's internet there, so we're hoping like if people are stuck on the survey, that he would be able to actually walk you through, or you can do it on your phone. The survey is really easy, and it's hard for us to know where to focus our efforts to build the pathway until we already see what's out there. And I'm sure a lot of you have at least a few native plants in your gardens, and that would make you eligible. It doesn't have to be a huge garden with a lot of different species. The survey is pretty easy. So we'd really like to encourage people to help us build that database so that we can use that moving forward. Thanks.
I would like to encourage anyone to sign up for Friends of Stewart Park's newsletters. I'm sure many of you do, but if you go to www.friendsofstewartpark.org, you could sign up, and we send 2 or 3 a month, and announce many volunteer events, cleanup events. I would really love, and I'd be talking to Kate about this, to have some, I guess, folks that are interested in and perhaps some trained in sort of native landscaping to help out on some of our gardens. I mean, some of you that may have had the images that we showed, most of the images are a few years old, and our gardens need to be kind of renovated and restored to a certain degree. They kind of have their peak aesthetic moment, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years after planting, and then they really do require thoughtful maintenance. So that's something that I'd really like to focus on this year. I will be asking you, Kate, if there's any interest, but we will be organizing some volunteer work days on specifically those gardens, and we'd love to let you know about that if you're interested, or just you want to know more news about Stewart Park or the Waterfront Trail. We'll love to have you on our mailing list as well.
I did notice that it just passed 8, Rick. So I am going to just breeze through again the just reminders for the different Waterfront Trail and Stewart Park activities that are coming up. Also, Mina's a great birder. I will be attending this event, so if you want to talk to me in person, you can find me here. I love birding in my own time. And these were the other 2 events. But I'm more than happy to, I'm going to stop sharing again, but I'm happy to stay on if anybody else had questions individually. But other than that, I just wanted to thank everybody for being here again. And I really enjoyed getting to share this information with you all.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. We appreciate your help.
Thanks, Brandon. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very informative.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
I signed up for the
Thanks,
list
Brandon.
me on the map. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.